Hello everyone, my name is Lowko and welcome to another game of StarCraft 2 Heart of the Swarm. Today I wanted to show you a game that I played a couple of days ago, and this is a pretty macro-heavy Zerg versus Zerg. As you might have already guessed by the title, this is going to be a 360, no scopes around, MLG, swag, Doritos, Dr. Pepper, all kinds of other, you know, like awesomeness. Quite honestly, it was a bit of a goofy game that I played on the live stream, but it has a pretty spectacular-esque ending compared to most other Zerg vs Zergs, where someone just sort of takes an engagement roughly and then, you know, has a slight upper hand because the opponent messes up his macro for 2 minutes and then all of a sudden you win, right? Like, that's what most of the macro Zerg vs Zergs are all about. But this is going to be a macro-heavy Roach vs Roach gasless opener, if I'm not mistaken, and it's going to be a, you know, pretty even game actually. I get behind for quite a while, but then we managed to come back, and I'll show you that. I'll show you that all in just a little bit. So, like I said, this is going to be macro heavy for the first couple minutes of the game. Like for the first like half of the game or so, really nothing is going to be happening at all. So what we're going to be talking about mainly is Zerg macro in Zerg vs Zerg. Now the reason why the builds are so similar, you will be able to see that on the production tab as well. Builds are going to be pretty similar in a lot of ways, whereas I do get the pool first, and I believe he's going to go for the hatchery first. You know, like it's simply just because of the fact that there's only a handful of builds that are actually viable. If you compare Zerg vs Terran and Zerg vs Protoss, most of the times there's quite a couple of builds that you can be going for as a Zerg player. But in Zerg vs Zerg, you can either go pool first or hatchery first, and you can either go for a gasless opener or an opener with Zergling speed. Other than that, there aren't really that many options. So there we go. By the way, nice little trick which you can do right after the attack, right after the opponent's drone hits your drone. There's always a little bit of a delay in the movement, so if you put down your hatchery right after the attack, 99% of the time you will be able to get it up. But what I was trying to say there is that there is a limited amount of openers that you see in Zerg vs Zerg to begin with, so for the most part, the production tab in the early part of the game, as well as the supply counts, will look pretty damn similar. Now, because the counter to Roaches is Roaches, a lot of people have tried, you know, making Hydralisk build work, because obviously Roaches can't shoot up, but for the most part, on maps like this, that have relatively short rust distance, Roaches will simply just be able to overrun Hydralisk players. So for the most part, the counter to Roaches is Roaches. So, you know, considering that the counter to Roaches is Roaches, and that there only is a limited amount of builds that you can really be going for the most part, the early part of the game, as well as the middle part of the game, will look extremely similar until a certain, you know, a certain player either gets an advantage because of like a poor engagement, or because one of the players overcommits. Because most of the time, because it is so similar, the defender's advantage is absolutely enormous, okay? The defender's advantage basically means is that, let's say we are doing the same build, we are playing the exact same strategy, we are going for similar upgrades, we are going for a similar third base timing, and we're doing everything the same. Let's say that is going on, right? His reinforcing Roaches, if we are fighting on his side of the map, will get there faster than my reinforcing Roaches, and that's basically what the defender's advantage is. On top of that, as the defender, you also have this option, you also have this great little way you know, getting some extra position advantage, so to say. You basically have a little bit more time to set up that concave and to make sure that you have the perfect engagement and whatnot. I actually end up losing a drone right there for absolutely no apparent reason. I'm gonna have to block him off to make sure that he doesn't run up to my main base. I do manage to do that. And in the meantime, you know, we are both opening up gasless. I am aware of the fact that he's opening up gasless, and he's not really aware of the fact that I'm opening up gasless. But then again, you know, there's a limited amount of builds. Like I said, he will be aware that if I played a if I played a Speedling build, that these Speedlings would have already been out. He sees a slow Zergling, so at this point, even though my opponent didn't really scout my main base, he didn't really see my gas geysers, he will be aware of the fact that I am also playing gasless. So at this point, the game is practically even, okay? He might be able to pick another drone right there, he doesn't end up doing so. The only real difference so far is that my macro has been slightly better than his, so I'm a little bit ahead in supply, but nothing too major. Now, most of the time, when you are playing gasless and it's gonna be versus like a Speedling build, the real change is made right when the third base is taken. So right when the third base is taken is usually when the decision is made who is gonna get ahead because of the bigger economy. However, because we are both playing gasless and we both are aware of this, we know that the only thing we really need to be focusing on is getting that third base slightly faster than our opponent, then get slightly more drones, and then make sure the defender's advantage and the bigger economy is gonna give us the advantage that we're looking for. So, you know, right now, like basically what I'm trying to say is that this game has been looking extremely similar. Simply for the fact that, you know, we're playing a similar build, we're both going for roaches, and we both know where the advantage is gotten, and that is not in a timing attack right now. That is right when the +1/+1 finishes, but rather when the third base is gonna go up and the amount of drones that are gonna be mining. So right there, I'm gonna be moving a drone across the map right now, or, you know, not across the map, towards my third base, and I'm gonna take that building right there, boom, hatchery going down. He's gonna get ahead slightly in supply right now because he had some extra minerals to spare right there on drones rather than at third base. But very soon, he's also going to be starting up his hatchery, whereas I start my roach speed right now, glide over constitution. He started his like 5 seconds later. As you can see, like the production tab, it's practically the same, okay? Like he's also gotten his overseers in production right now. He's also gotten his third base in production. And this is what most of the Zerg for the Zergs that open up gaswoods will look like, simply for the fact that, well, neither player really wants to take a risk, neither player really wants to do very much of anything. And the one advantage that we are able to get is the economy advantage, or to catch your opponents off guard, but that most of the time won't be happening at this level of play. So right now I scouted what was going on there. I saw, okay, it's a gases opener early on in the game, it's going to be a roach follow-up, no quick zerking speed shenanigans. So what I'm going to do right now, even though I know it's not really going to work, but what I'm going to do right now is just sort of make as many roaches as I possibly can, wait for my upgrades to finish up, and then move across the map. Now, I'm actually gonna make a slight mistake, okay? I have scouted this all. I have scouted all that is going on right now. I know exactly what is happening. I know that my opponent is having a similar build to me, and he likely will have very similar amounts of units, and yet I'm gonna be caught off guard, and you guys see that in a second. So right now, my plan is to make a big bunch of roaches. My +1/+1 just finished, and while I'm moving out across the map, I'm gonna try and make a couple of drones for my third base, so I get that economy advantage going, knowing that I likely won't be able to do very much with this aggression, because I don't think my opponent over-droned either. So right now I'm making a bunch of drones, as you can see right there. He's also, actually, no, that's actually me making a bunch of drones right there. And I'm gonna be starting up +2/+2, and I'm gonna just try and do a bunch of damage. Now, I know that I shouldn't be having an advantage right here, okay? And I shouldn't really be engaging right here. It's just not really a feasible fight, because of the queens helping out as well, because of the defender's advantage, exactly what I was trying to point out earlier. I know that is not really going to be very much of an advantage at all. So I'm gonna be forced to push back, or to pull back, start +2/+2 up, and now that I have my third base saturated, I'm gonna have a slight little advantage. So this is where Zerg vs Zerg becomes quite interesting. I did actually imagine that my opponent was gonna go for a bigger counterattack, so whatever reason I started a bunch of Zerglings right now. I think those must have been a misclick. I don't really understand why I would do that. But, you know, you can really see the differences in economy right now, as in pretty much, well, he actually has a slight little advantage. He got a bunch more workers than me. But you can really notice the difference right now, and it's not very big, right? Like, it's 119 supply versus, oh, well, it was 116 at the time that I said that, but it's just gonna be very, very even. And the only way, at this point, we're gonna get an advantage is through a couple of ways, okay? So first off, I could switch into Hydralisk, or I could switch into Swarm Host, or I could switch into infestors. Now, those are the options that I really do have. Now, keep in mind, right now you can see me take the Hydra Den right there, but keep in mind that that is a very risky thing to do because, well, if I don't manage to get a significant advantage with the Hydras a little bit later on in the game, that investment is gonna be pretty big. It is a pretty expensive buildings, the upgrades are pretty expensive, the units are pretty expensive, and before I can really use them, I need to get both of the upgrades on them. So, you know, all in all, this is like a 450 gas commitment or something like that, or 400 gas commitment, which is huge, and I need to make sure that is worth my time. My opponent does have a slight little timing window right now, where he will have significantly more army. As you can see, he has about 8 supply more, simply because I invested into getting those upgrades, into getting the Hydralisk out, and my opponent decided not to. I'm also gonna start some extra gases right now because I will need that. And obviously, you know, you can see this slight little difference in supply come into play because, well, I'm gonna move across the map once more with +2/+2 finishing up, or +2 attack finishing up rather. And I'm getting a Hydra Den right now, but my opponent will have slightly more supply simply for the fact that, you know, the Hydra den right there is getting some upgrades and it is researching. So this is where I overextend. This is what I was talking about earlier on in the game. I knew that it was gonna happen. I knew that I didn't have a superior economy to my opponent. I knew that I didn't have like superior upgrades to my opponent either. And this is where I make a mistake, okay? My opponent gets a nice round on my army and I know that he has a defender's advantage. I know that he has you know, probably not committed into something like Hydras, so I shouldn't be pushing right there. That was a big loss right there, okay? You could see that quite clearly. He managed to get about a 30 supply advantage. And what I'm gonna do right now is reinforce this with Hydras. I think if my opponent would have just taken all of his army, just box clicked it to my side of the map, he probably would have won this right here, okay? So that was about, I think about a 5-second window right there that I missed, and all of a sudden I'm pretty far behind. Now luckily for me, my opponent decides to not attack, which is interesting. I think if he would have done that, you know, he would have definitely won. But the one way I can come back right now is to either max out and try and get a superior engagement, or you know, to get a really good engagement right now if my opponent moves across the map, and that's exactly what is going to happen. So economies are pretty even, right? My opponent is likely gonna get you know, a fort base going pretty soon, and so am I. Economies are pretty even, but the only thing that's really gonna change it is going to be either a maxed out engagement where I have Hydras and my opponent doesn't, which is likely gonna happen if this continues a little while longer, or we're gonna get a beautiful 360 no scope surrounds MLG swag YOLO Doritos Dr. Pepper sort of thing, and you'll see that in just a little bit right here. We're just dancing around the watchtower. My opponent wants to engage right here, knowing that his upgrade just finished up, knowing that I'm committing to Hydralisk, and my opponent decides to go in right there. He's not engaging very well. I decide to get the full surround of all of his army, and this, combined with the defender's advantage, as well as the, you know, having of Hydralisk that just deal a ton more damage than Roaches, will allow me to take this fight quite significantly, simply because of this surround right there. And the way that was done was simply just by running around the watchtower, trying to get the superior engagement, and by simply going for the surround right there on his army. Now, even though right now I don't really have that big of a supply advantage, I do have a lot more Hydras right now. If you take a look at the unit count, it is currently 18 Hydras versus 12. I got a bunch more in production, or actually got a bunch more Roaches in production. But you can, you know, see these little tiny differences really come into play. My opponent made like a slight mistake right there, just not not really prepared for the defenders or for my defenders advantage and the positioning right there, and I end up with the advantage. But I need to watch out. Once again, this is kind of risky by me. I need to run out because I literally cannot take that engagement right there, because, well, if I take a wrong engagement, my opponent is gonna get ahead again in Zerg versus Zerg, in Roach versus Roach, just because of how, you know, how volatile this can really be. One slight mistake and it will pretty much instantly be game over. So what I decide to do instead is just sort of try and take out his creep spread. The other option that I have is to try and get up to a hive. That's exactly what I'm trying right now. Also gonna get the fort base going as far as the gold goes. But right now I have a slight little advantage simply because of that engagement we had earlier. Now keep in mind, I need to make sure that I don't give that away. Don't want to have that happen. But I see my opponent took a fort base. I'm gonna have to try my very best to get the kill on that fort base. I'm running across it right now, making sure that my Hydras in the back, hopefully. There we go. My Hydras are moving towards the back, making sure my Roaches are in front. Trying to get the surround right there on his army. Once again, a good engagement. My opponent has a lot of the Hydras in the front, whereas most of my Hydralisk are in the back right there, and my Roaches in the front. Nice little superior to concave by me, allowing me to pick off these Hydras, and I'm just moving forward right there, picking off more and more units. Gonna use my army to clean up his army, moving back a couple of the Hydras, knowing that they are exposed and dealing more damage. Gonna send a small group of units right there towards his fort base, and my opponent decides to GG. So you can really see that I made a mistake early part in the game. He got a slight advantage, then he made a mistake, I got a slight advantage, and that advantage sort of carried me through the victory. But very easily, that could have also carried me towards a loss if I overextended. So Zerg versus Zerg, very volatile matchup, very difficult matchup for the most part, very difficult to get a sincere advantage simply because, you know, it's Roach versus Roach, it's similar builds and whatnot. But I hope you guys, you know, learned a little bit from this game. If you did, hit that like button. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. And I want to thank you guys all for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!